So my name is Hayden Jamieson. I've been climbing since I was 16 years old. I'm 21 now, so I guess that's 5 years, 6 years, something like that. I'm from Mammoth Lakes, California. It's just outside Bishop and Yosemite. Uh, so my story, I kind of grew up learning how to climb in the Mammoth area. So Tuolumne Meadows is like the eastern side of Yosemite National Park, and that's like where it's 20 or 30 minutes from my house. So I learned how to climb there, primarily trad climbing, kind of sport climbing, if that's what you want to call it, but like 40, 50 feet between bolts, so not really sport climbing. And I had actually never been to Yosemite Valley proper, besides when I was like a really, really little kid until this past year. So I actually went down there with my dad and climbed Royal Arches, which is like a really, really famous old school climb there, super long, like 5'6" or something. And we were only down there for a day, so we only had the time to climb one route. And since then, I had gotten this like terrible bug to go climbing in the valley, and I was so psyched to like go try all of this stuff that I had never gotten the opportunity to get on before. And I've climbed around Salt Lake for the past 4 years or so, and climbed like lots of boulders and sport routes and hard trad routes, but all this like kind of smaller stuff seemed kind of insignificant to me, and I was really, really psyched to get to the valley and like try these big walls. So this year in October, I got the chance to go to the valley for 10 days, and I was having a really hard time organizing climbing partners to get down there with. So eventually I called my godfather, who is like he's in his early 60s, and he's this like crazy, crusty climbing bum who lives down in Bishop, and he's lived down there putting up first ascents in the Sierra with like Peter Croft and John Backer for the last 40 years or something. He's like a really, really prolific kind of first ascensionist there. And I called him, and he really wanted to go do a route with me called the Stex Alate, which is on Sentinel Rock in the valley. And that's like a really classic old school route that's 5'9"-ish, but it's kind of hard to grade something that's like that because the crux of the route is a squeeze chimney that you basically have to jump into to get inside, and it's so narrow that you can't squeeze your helmet through it, and you're tunneling through this wall for 100 feet. So I had heard of this route being super notorious, and I was really scared of going to do it, honestly. And after I called my godfather, he was super psyched. He hadn't been on the route since 1976, and so it would be his first time on the route in like 30 years or 40 years, something like that. So the day before we went to do the route, I actually hiked to the top of Sentinel and like stashed a bunch of water and scoped out the descent, because the descent's pretty notorious for being kind of scary and people get lost and epic on it all the time. And the day after, we left Camp 4 at 3 a.m. and started hiking up to the base of the route that we had found the day before. Basically, this whole route was like a battle from the ground to the summit. I think the first pitch of the route is 50 feet long, and it probably took me close to an hour to lead the first pitch, because you're squeezing through this like horrendous 5'8" squeeze chimney, like bleeding all over the pit, all over the place. And I got to the top of the first pitch and was completely wasted. Like, felt like I had just climbed 100 pitches, and the route is like 20 pitches long or something. So we still had like a huge day ahead of us. And Bruce is super old. He had a terrible, terrible injury like 10 years ago where he Lynn Hilled and didn't finish tying in and fell off the top of a route like 90 or 100 feet to his back and broke like over 100 bones in his body and has half of his vertebrae fused together right now. So he is literally like a shattered pot or something like that that's just been glued back together, and somehow at like 62 years old he can still climb. So naturally he he basically elected after we had gotten to the top of the first pitch that I was going to lead the next few pitches. And he's like, yeah, I don't feel that great. Just take the next pitch and we'll see how I feel, and then maybe I'll take the pitch after that. And that trend went on for the entire route. And this route that I had looked at for like the past 4 months in planning for the trip, I ended up leading like all 19 or 20 pitches of the whole thing. Honestly scaring the living shit out of myself on almost every pitch. Like almost every pitch is wide and physical, and at the top of every pitch I felt like I didn't really have too much in me, but I don't know, this whole day ended up being like 15 or 16 hours to get to the top of the route, and then another 6 or 7 hours on the way back down to the parking lot because we got lost on the way down in the dark, of course. And it ended up being this like 20-some hour day that was like a complete epic. And looking back on it was like the milestone where I look at my climbing and I had like a goal that at the time seemed super audacious and like way too big, and all we had to do was go out and do it. And as intimidated as I was, like standing at the base of every pitch and really just like standing in the parking lot looking up at the route from below, like realizing that as you like slowly start to pick away at this stuff, that it becomes a lot more possible, and all it takes is a little bit of will, and you just have to get outside your comfort zone.